welcome to this latest edition of Maz's Musings, where Greg Cameron and I continue our breakdown of those potential Patriots draft targets outside of the consensus top three. We're breaking down the edge players, the tight ends, and the offensive tackle in this particular episode, so let's get right to it.
So jumping back over the defense, we're going to talk about some edge guys. And these are, like we talked about before with the defensive linemen, these are the guys who are more stand up there. I'm not really considering, there could be some guys that do both, that have their hand in the dirt, that you could say, well, that they're a defensive lineman. They put their hand on the dirt at the end of the line. But I think overall, we're not going to nitpick too much when it comes to this. Edge isn't even a real position, so it's kind of nebulous, but we're going to roll with it. What they have as the consensus top three for the edge is Dallas Turner from Alabama, Leatu Latu from UCLA. I probably butchered that one too. I apologize to all these people's families. And Jared Verse from Florida State.
Okay, yeah. So, I would say Jared Verse, after watching him in the ACC championship game. Oh.
Yes, yeah. And this is one of those positions that is a sneaky position of need. You've got Judon, who's going to be 31, coming off an injury, and who else?
Dietrich Wise.
Well, right, but he's not standing up, and you're not standing Keon White up much either. So
no. And Jennings is sort of nebulous to that too. It's weird. It's definitely a position in flux for the Patriots.
So the first guy that I have is Braylon Trice from Washington. I think one thing that I need in the edge rusher is obviously athleticism, and that's why I like the Keon White pick so much last year. Even though Keon White, it wasn't necessarily a need at the time, but that kind of high motor athleticism was something that I loved. And Trice is one of those high motor guys who's just always creating pressure. He got some knocks from some scouts that I read because of his tackling was hit or miss, but I feel like that's something that's teachable, coachable, especially with the coaching staff that they put together here. I don't think that missed tackles are something that's going to be tolerated. It'll be coached out of you, or you'll be out of here. And he's just one of those. He's one of those just athletic guys who just pressures the quarterback.
Yeah, he was such a standout for the Huskies last year that when you weren't watching Penix and the offense in the three-headed monster at receiver, that when you were watching their defense, it was he and Tupuola Fatui on the edges. And I feel like Braylon Trice was just such a monster for them.
All right, who you got first?
My first guy is from a program that I love watching. Kyle Whittingham just coaches players that are just so mean on defense. And one of the guys who caught my eye this season, especially in that program, and just feels like a Utah guy to me, is Jonah Ellis. Who's the son of a former NFL player, Luther Ellis, who played for the Detroit Lions. Last year, he played in 10 games and had 17 tackles, 6 of them for assists, 25 stops against the run. That's another underrated part of this position, too, is that you need guys who can do a little bit of everything. Get you a man who can do it all. And he had 41 total pressures against quarterbacks, 26 of them hurries, 2 of them quarterback hits, and 13 sacks. Again, 13 sacks. I think that he's just a guy who just feels like at the professional level is just going to be a guy who just gets it and is just going to be able to play, day one. Feels like a second round that you trade back up for or hope and pray that he's there at the top of the third. But Jonah Ellis, to quote Steve Adazio from your favorite program, the Boston College Eagles, he's a dude. Just being a dude.
He is a dude.
Be a dude.
More of a dude than Steve Adazio.
Some would argue, yes.
You want to talk about, we were talking about false bravado earlier. Steve Adazio is just full of that. But you heard that at one time he worked with Tim Tebow, so that must make him a good coach. Getting off track here. I sat through a lot of bad Steve Adazio football games, so I harbor more ill will than I probably should. All right, so my next guy. So this is a guy who isn't so much a pass rusher as he is, an edge defender. If the Patriots part ways with Anthony Jennings, replacing him with another Alabama edge with the talent for setting the edge in the running game, probably not the worst move. Chris Braswell and Jennings are almost identical in terms of their height and weight. And their scouting reports are almost like they are strikingly similar. Great at setting the edge, defending the run, and really, hit or miss when it comes to rushing the passer. So it feels like, if you are going to move on from that guy, and Jennings is a guy that I think can continue to have a role on this team, and especially with the money that the Patriots have to throw around, would be easy to keep. But if they don't, or if they're looking to do like you've mentioned before, setting up for the next guy, this is a guy that can provide that depth and maybe keep those positions of that turnover from becoming holes. He's one that I really like.
Not to sound all Lee Corso, and great pick with my Tycon Daroga at number 2, which I don't have with me. But great pick. I feel like the Patriots have always had that Alabama pipeline. It's going to be interesting with both Saban and Belichick not in either of those jobs to see if that pipeline stops. But I feel like there's enough kind of overlap, especially if they take a lot of Washington guys this year, to see sort of where that goes with the new coaching change down in Tuscaloosa with their new coach. But that wasn't a guy that I had as my second guy. I had a guy from a program that just got a new coach this week in Deshaun Foster, and that's UCLA's Gabriel Murphy. I feel like Latu got a lot of the shine, which is fine. At a place like the New England Patriots, as long as you're productive, we'll take you. And I feel like Murphy, as a fifth-year senior, was awesome for them. He definitely didn't get the shine that Latu got, but was just really solid and good for them. 22 tackles, 5 assisted tackles, 23 stops against the run, 55 total pressures, which sounds insane, and because it kind of is. 38 quarterback hurries, 11 quarterback hits, and 6 sacks. And that's as the second guy as an edge rusher for a program that was decent on defense. So I feel like a guy like Gabriel Murphy reminds me a lot of Anthony Jennings, in that could be a little bit of a late bloomer at the next level. But I feel like with where this defense is, you could take a guy like that in the middle rounds and feel good about the guy that you're getting. And hopefully you don't draft his brother, who's similar but didn't play as much as Gabriel did.
And didn't get a combine.
And did not get a combine invite. That's right.
Gabriel got one. Grayson did not. But yeah, Gabriel Murphy was my third edge pick, and for all the same reasons. I mean, I have to tip my hat to you on that one. I thought long and hard about putting him above Braswell, but I just felt like the Jennings comp to Braswell just fit with what the Patriots have and what they need a little more, create a little bit more immediate help. But I think you're absolutely right that he's a great developmental prospect that really could fit into some kind of situational stuff. He's got special teams experience too. Like that's something that's a big thing. So
not nothing here.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of those things that philosophically we'll see if it changes. If there's as much emphasis on that in the new regime as there was in the Belichick era. But it's certainly always something to consider when you're weighing two guys. If he can contribute like that tips the scale.
And he's just solid. Like I feel like especially with grading draft prospects and looking at them, it's really easy to get sucked into the flashy players and the players that kind of stand out. Guys who are just solid, like Gabriel Murphy. I love watching collegiate players like that. Guys who are just good. Especially in a side of the ball that they don't necessarily need all that much. A guy like a Gabriel Murphy would be just an awesome developmental guy for them. My
All
third
right.
guy also comes from the Pac-12 or Pac whatever it is now. I think it's just Pac-2 now with Oregon State and Wazoo. But I'm going to go with Zion Tupuola-Fatui from the University of Washington in 13 games. Had 29 total tackles, 5 of them for loss, 3.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. Injury history is definitely a concern with this player, and I think it's definitely slowed his progress throughout his collegiate career. But if he's a later to mid-round guy, could be a guy that you kind of keep around a while and sort of have him again like a late bloomer, like Anthony Jennings was. Just have a guy who you have in your building ready to go as he sort of develops and learns the system and learns the nuances.
Yeah, no, I've certainly mocked him a couple times in the late rounds. I do wonder about the injuries. I wonder how much it's taken out of him, if he's the same physically as, as he once showed promise. So, he someone who, if he took a day 3 dart throw, I'd be on board for that.
Yeah, could be a fun project. It's like that meme of the broken down record player. Could be fun if it's fixed.
All right, so let's see. Who do we have for names here? You go first because my screen just went blank on me. So I need you to stall for me for a second.
Great. I can totally vamp. So I chose a player from the football factory that is Towson University in beautiful Baltimore, Maryland. And the linebacker I took, his name is Jesus Gibbs, which again just sounds like something that a coach would yell at a player while also not trying to like take the Lord's name in vain. So I said to my wife earlier as I had done this, like about doing the fun name thing, and she was like, "Well, give me one." And I was like, "Well, I'm doing linebackers at this point." And the linebacker that I chose, his name is Jesus Gibbs, and I could just envision like a yelling, like red in the face kind of coach, being like, "Jesus Gibbs, what are you doing?" So Jesus Gibbs from Towson gets my vote here.
Man, I don't know if I can top that. I think the one that stood out to me, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it, Jalix Hunt, Jallyx Hunt. It's just a cool football name. Just he's from Houston Baptist. So if I were to say that I knew anything about him, I'd be lying through my teeth. But just one of those names that when I was looking through the list, I was just like, oh, I like that one. So nothing really profound.
That's a good one. That is an aesthetically pleasing spelling too. Jallyx. I will tell you, I did have a backup just in case you also took Jesus Gibbs, and this is going well into the bag here. And it was I saw it here for a second, and it was player 819, an edge player from Eastern Illinois. Or no, I'm sorry, 849, an edge guy from Benedict College, Lubert Denilis. Lubert Denilis.
849 in your big board, number 1 in your hearts.
He might be a force in the CFL. Who knows? I'm rooting for Lubert.
All right, so moving on to tight ends. This is a group that, well, again, the Patriots, that you've got Hunter Henry is our old friend Pharaoh Brown under contract?
So right now they don't have anybody in the tight end room because all of them are free agents, all 3, including secret weapon Pharaoh Brown.
For some reason, I had it in my head that Mac Jones' best friend there was under contract for 1 more year, but no, yeah.
And they don't have a tight ends coach either because Will Lawing is going to Boston College, we think. By the time this airs, he might be the offensive coordinator in Chestnut Hill.
All right. So with a completely clean slate, the consensus top 3 are Brock Bowers out of Georgia, Jatavion Sanders out of Texas, and Cade Stover from Ohio State. I feel like Stover's the one who gets overlooked a lot in all of this.
And he's the guy that you and I like the most because we've mocked him a lot.
Well, I mean, I like Brock Bowers the best, but I don't like him, at where he's going to be drafted. So.
Same.
All right, so I can't remember who started the last one, so I'm just going to start this one.
Go
I've
for it.
got for my first one, Dallin Holker from Colorado State. He reminds me a lot of like a Dalton Schultz. Well, not outstanding. He's not an outstanding athlete and not an outstanding blocker, but he's solid all around. He's got good hands and a good feel for getting open. And quarterback play was not a friend to him at all, but in either of his spots, whether it was CSU or BYU. But he always produced, and he's got that pro ready look to him.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Colorado State, just sort of an odd program, I think, just in general. I mean, as we had just talked about, a guy who we both think has some questionable credentials was the coach there, and that was Steve Adazio. But I feel like Holker could be definitely something interesting at the next level. I don't know, like it's such a weird program. Like they played Colorado tough when they played them early in the year when everybody thought that Colorado was going to be the next big thing in the Pac-12. Or yeah, they were in the Pac-12 this past year. They moved back to the Big 12, I think, this year. But it's such a weird program. He was definitely not a guy that I had on my list, but I feel like is a guy who at the next level could definitely be a solid growth tight end. My first guy I had was from a program that I really like because they're a little bit weird. They're definitely in other sports the little brother in other sports, and that is the Kansas State. I believe the Kansas State Cougars, and that is Ben Sinnott. His quarterback rating when targeted was 112.9. Again, Mac Jones could never. He was a versatile security blanket tight end for them. I've seen some comparisons comparing him to Michael Mayer, who was a domer and played okay for the Raiders this year on a franchise that was kind of a mess, but could definitely be a really solid day two guy if the Patriots go that route. And that program just produces like corn-fed, solid players at tight end and across both lines, and was also the alma mater of former Heisman Trophy winner and former Patriots draftee Michael Bishop. So I feel like Ben Sinnott would be a really awesome day two pick for the Patriots if they address it in rounds 2 or 3.
So Ben Sinnott was not on my list because I knew he was going to be on yours, but I am totally on board with him. You mentioned that Michael Mayer was okay with the Raiders, and that's something that I mean, tight end tends to be a position where you're not going to get a lot of year one impact. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
For a lot of guys. More often than not, it doesn't happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of scenario where they pair some kind of pick like Sinnott with a veteran, whether it's bringing Hunter Henry back or going with someone who's played with some of the incoming offensive coaching staff, like in Austin Hooper or something like that. So there will be opportunity for him to contribute some, but I don't think that there's anybody who's on our list at least. And I think that really, I don't think that there's going to be a huge effort for the Patriots to jump up and grab someone high, from like I say that consensus top 3. So the guys we're looking at may not have an immediate impact, but that may be really the plan is, they're going to be, situational guys or guys who are developmental, while we bring in, some veteran who probably is not going to be overly exciting because it's not an overly exciting list. But anyway, with that in mind, my next guy is just a straight up seam stretcher, and red zone target kind of guy. That's Theo Johnson from Penn State. I don't think he's ever going to be like a complete tight end. He's not going to hold up as a every down inline guy, but he's got a ton of passing game upside. Excuse me. The Patriots roster just doesn't have that. Period. I mean, so having that guy who can occasionally, stretch the field from the seam in the short term and maybe grow more of a route tree, behind a veteran, is something I'm game for.
It totally and under James Franklin at that program, they've developed tight ends to the second level here, to the NFL level over the last several years. Whether it's potentially old friend, current friend Mike Gesicki, and then Massachusetts native Pat Fryermuth too. So it's become a sneaky, really good kind of natural resource for the Nittany Lions over the last couple of years. I didn't have Theo on my list. The next guy I had was a guy that you and I mocked kind of to each other last year before he went back to help row the boat in Minnesota under PJ Fleck, and that's Brevin Spann-Ford. Oh, was he your third guy? Oh, he was, wasn't he? Oh, I just feel like he's a great blocker. He's got some good NFL traits. Could be a guy that stuff just gets unlocked at the NFL level. And especially if it's a rounds 4 through 7 kind of guy, sign me up. He just has all kinds of measurables that just seem like exactly what you want at the next level, and played in a program that is in a conference that's very kind of running back tight end heavy. Yeah, give me Brevin Spann-Ford from the University of Minnesota.
Absolutely. I co-sign that 100%. Dude is a mountain. He's 6'7", almost 270 pounds. Athlon Sports, when they did their write-up on him, I'm gonna read this for you because it's one of my
Please
favorite.
do.
Watching this guy catch passes over the middle of the field was like watching Monstar Patrick Ewing dunking on Elmer Fudd in Space Jam. Now, the drawbacks to him, he's an older prospect. He's been in college for 6 years because of COVID and everything like that. But he's just got that NFL tight end look.
Just measurables for days, and he's one of my favorite tight ends in this draft. And again, last year when he could have come out, I think he was a guy that you and I had in the third, fourth roundabout somewhere there. And I think coming back to college, especially playing for that Minnesota team that wasn't good, wasn't bad, certainly wasn't trash by any means. But I feel like him coming back to school kind of lowered his draft stock a little.
Yeah.
But he just seems like a ball of clay that you can mold into something awesome, especially being at 6'7", nearly 270 pounds. Yeah, give me that guy. My third guy comes from a school that just breeds tight ends. You know how Penn State breeds linebackers, Boston College breeds now interior offensive linemen? Well, the University of Iowa, despite not scoring all that much on offense and just loving the punt game, they breed tight ends. You got Dallas Clark, George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta. They've all flourished in Iowa City. And then in the NFL, my third guy is Eric All from Iowa. Give me just that corn-fed tight end who can catch the ball, stretch the field a little bit, can block a little bit, can do a little bit of everything that the position demands. Yeah, give me Eric All.
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as you started talking about him, I was just like, oh, well, I should have put him on my list as like my fourth in case we had these kinds of things. And then, well, you would have taken him from me anyway. So, or I would have taken him from you. So I like how we're kind of in sync with a lot of these, but at the same time, we've found some places where we've differed a little bit. There have been some people who straight up haven't been on each other's lists.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about like Spann-Ford, that I feel like we both can see like, oh yeah, that dude is a mountain. We should figure out like how the Patriots could use him, how any team in this draft could use him. I feel like the best part of this exercise is you try and find guys who are outside of the consensus top 3, and that's what for me one of the most fun things about the NFL draft is you try and find players that are kind of barn finds. And I feel like especially with a position like tight end, you can find guys that develop into something crazy. Look at the tight end who just won the Super Bowl this past year. He wasn't a first round guy; he was a third round guy in Travis Kelce. And I feel like, especially at tight end, you can find players that develop into something later on after you draft them. You draft a guy because he does one thing well, one good attribute that he has. Then you can kind of develop and mold that guy into whatever it is that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to your point, tight end on the other side, George Kittle is a fifth round pick, so
Yeah.
you do not have to. Now, granted, someone like Bowers is kind of a unicorn. He's one of the best tight end prospects we've seen, in a long time. So you can see getting excited about that. But, you gotta understand that this is a position that probably isn't going to have the kind of immediate impact you're looking for from a high draft pick, and B, you can find this skill set lower in the draft, and really you're not mortgaging other needs to fill the tight end spot.
If you're looking for instant gratification at tight end, probably not going to find it.
All right, so my best tight end name is this one. To me, it sounded like a romance novel character.
Do it, because I knew you were going to do it and I didn't put it on my list.
Gentleman from Pitt, Gavin Bartholomew.
Oh, that's not the name that I thought you were going to do, so I could totally go. Yes. Oh my God. I thought you were going to go with the tight end out of Knoxville, Tennessee, McAllen Castles.
I thought about that, but I thought you were going to take him, so I left him alone.
And that's why I didn't, so I'm taking him now. Oh my God, upset of the year. The other name that I had was from Florida, Keon Zipperer.
Yes.
I'm going to say it a second time, Keon Zipperer.
All right, so moving on to one of the Patriots' top needs, and there's no way around that. As I believe you mentioned, there's talk that, this could be the Patriots', top pick, whether it's at 3 or if they trade down, and that's offensive tackle. We're not, even though that is a scenario that seems to be more realistic than some people would like it to be, we're not going to talk about the consensus top 3 here, which is Joe Alt from Notre Dame, Olu Fashanu from Penn State, and Talise Fuaga from Oregon State. Again, I apologize to these people's families because I'm just, flailing around here like a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum at Kmart.
And I will say again, with a guy like Fuaga, Oregon State always produces these just behemoths at offensive tackle. I forget who the guy was at the combine a couple of years ago who set like the bench press record. I think he was a tackle at Oregon State. And I remember it being just an obscene number of bench press reps. I can't wait to see what Fuaga does in Indianapolis on the bench, because it's going to be one of those obscene numbers where people are going to be like, oh, no, yeah, we're taking that guy at like 6.
Yeah, I always have trouble with tackle.
Same.
Because I know that it's such a premium position, especially in today's NFL. It's such a need, but there's just something about, it's like, okay, you have a tackle. You can't tangibly say, okay, we're that much closer to a Super Bowl, whereas with a quarterback, people do this exercise all the time. All right, if they had this quarterback, how many more wins would they have? You can't do exercises like that with a tackle, nor should you, because I think some of those arguments are stupid, but I have a hard time a lot of times figuring out exactly what the value is, putting my hands on the value and where the sweet spot is in terms of picks. I feel like a lot of times if you wait until the later rounds, your later rounds, even, you start getting into the
third round, even
depending on the draft, the mid second round, you're running into trouble. You're looking at developmental guys that are not going to help you necessarily, right off the bat, at a position that you really need guys to help you right off the bat, especially if you're going to, bring in or, draft a new quarterback. You need that guy being healthy and comfortable. So I believe I went first last time with the tight ends. So if you wanted to kick us off with tackle, have at it.
I will. I'm going to start with a guy I just like, and he's just absolutely huge. I should have taken down his measurables, but I'm sure we can kind of talk about it here on the run of play, and that's Patrick Paul from the University of Houston, who is a very popular mocked guy to the Patriots at 34. Is just a huge dude, just so big, really great pass blocker, and one of the attributes that I put here probably gives a crap a little bit more than Trent Brown did all year, and I think that that's certainly not something to discount with this team. And I feel like a guy who does a little bit of everything well, but especially does pass blocking really well, is something you need on the left side, especially in this offense. Or you put him on the right side if you take Michael Penix. You got to remember you got to flip everything on the other side for a left-hand quarterback. So my top guy is Patrick Paul out of Houston.
So my top guy, I had a hard time putting him here because I think that he's going to be out of reach one way or the other. I think that unless there's a major trade down, he's not someone who you're going to want to take as high, and I don't think he's going to be there in the second round. And that's J.C. Latham from Alabama. It's hard to argue against a 2-year starter at a program like Alabama. He's just one of those guys who's got the size, strength, and athleticism that you look for, and there's just like not much to not like about him. I guess the only thing is he's young. He's 20. He'll be 21 when he starts his rookie year. So you could think that maybe he could use a little bit more development, but the physical tools are there. So I put him on the list because I like him, but I don't think that he is really going to be available to them in this draft.
Yeah, and that's the thing about a guy like J.C. Latham. I think you look at kind of the offensive line history that Saban teams have had. They've produced kind of some solid guys with some notable exceptions, guys who just didn't pan out at the next level. But I feel like with J.C. Latham seems to me like the exact kind of guy that at the next level is just going to be solid. And for a team that is tackle needy like the Patriots, sometimes you just take a guy who's not a sexy player by any means. This isn't a sexy position, but I feel like a guy like J.C. Latham, kind of in my eyes a little bit, reminds me of a Patriots tackle of yesteryear who kind of fits that mold or that description of not a sexy player, but a good, solid player, like a Nate Solder. Nate Solder was the least flashy guy out there as a tackle, but was just solid. So Latham just sort of feels to me like that mid-first round kind of tackle who you take and don't have to worry about for a while.
I debated putting him on this list or not, because, like I said, because of where I think he's going to be drafted. But I just, like you said, he's just projects to be such a solid player that I felt like I couldn't leave him out, if we're having a realistic discussion on this. He's a guy who, if you had taken the quarterback at 3 and for whatever reason he drops, you run the card up there as far as I'm concerned.
To me, he feels like he's the exact guy who takes over for Jordan Mailata in Philadelphia. Like, I feel like the Eagles just take a guy like that and he's like, oh, okay, great. We're just going to keep putting infinity stones in the Thanos glove here, especially along our lines. And J.C. Latham just feels exactly like that kind of like luxury that they don't need, but they'll take.
Absolutely.
So my second guy, I'm going to take a guy from the Ivy League. So, a Yale guy's got to be a smart tackle, right? Oh, I see the look. Oh, you also had Kieran Omega-Jaw, didn't you? You did, Chris, didn't you?
I was literally just looking up to make sure that I was going to pronounce his name correctly. So.
I did the pronunciation guide thing earlier, and he's big, he's experienced, which the Patriots kind of need. He could be kind of had somewhere in day 2, perhaps. He helped lead Yale to the Ivy League lead in rushing as just a big dude blocking for their running backs. Give me a Yale guy like Kieran Omega-Jaw, and again, just another tackle that you draft and you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I'm taking another thing from Athlon Sports again. What they said about him. They said he may or may not have been born at Home Depot because he's got tools for days. I watched some of his highlights, and it's just filled with stuff like, Michael Orr in The Blind Side walking the guy back to the bus. Like there's a lot of that. And that's the kind of stuff that you want to see, when you're looking at a prospect who's coming from a smaller school. You want to see them absolutely dominating, those guys. You don't want to see them struggling with those guys. And that's exactly what he did. He imposed his will on whoever was in front of him. And it really, I just, there's a lot to love about the player. And, I, he's a Yale guy, so he's not going to be, short on the smart side either.
Yeah, I feel like he's the exact kind of guy who's not going to, again, I don't want to dump on Trent Brown, who in 2019 was great. Trent Brown just kind of just was passive all year. And I feel like a guy from Yale who has tools for days isn't going to be passive. The left tackle for the New England Patriots can't be a passive guy. Give me a Megajug day in, day out.
All right, so I'm co-signing on that. So if you wanted to go to number three,
my number three is a guy who recently has been skyrocketing up draft boards, as I've seen, because I've been watching a lot of Good Morning Football before I go to my job, and that's Jordan Morgan from Arizona. He was the other guy that I had from that Jed Fish system in Tucson. He was at tackle for a really surprising team this year, and he could be a second round / trade back into the first type of guy, just super athletic. I saw some comps earlier that kind of compare him favorably to guys who we mocked to the Patriots a year ago when they probably should have taken a tackle. And guys like Matthew Bergeron and Broderick Jones, take or leave his off the field exploits. But I feel like a guy like a Jordan Morgan just maybe fits what a more kind of motion-based West Coast set could use. So my third guy is Jordan Morgan. It feels like a cop-out to take a guy who's probably going to go in the top 45 picks as your third guy. But, the position here is just so deep in this year's draft. So my third guy is Jordan Morgan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love like the athleticism that he brings to the position, especially. He's another guy who I didn't put him on my list because I already had Latham, so I was just like, these are two guys who might not be there when when the Patriots are drafting, or so I left him off, but I did like the player a lot. So I did say that I was going to co-sign on our friend from Yale, whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce.
Kieran Omegaja.
Yeah, I'll leave that to you. I'm going to start practicing after we draft him. But I'm backing off of that a little bit just because I'll keep it short. But I really like both of these guys for different reasons. First one is Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma. He's another Senior Bowl guy. I love my Senior Bowl guys, and reports where he was just a monster, just overpowering guys. The question here is, he's a right tackle prospect. He's played right tackle. That's what he's played. Is that as important if there's a scenario where the Patriots draft a left-handed quarterback? Is that a problem?
I don't know that it's a problem for me.
So, he's where he's projected to go in the draft. I don't think that I'd take a right tackle, without having a left tackle worked out. Yeah, and that's not to say he can't play the left side, but we've never seen him play the left side. So that's the knock on him. But just the way that he can dominate on that right side and was a really good player for Oklahoma. Especially if the quarterback position goes a certain way, he becomes much more of an enticing option. The other guy is a later pick, and this would be a pick after you've made your tackle pick earlier in the draft, and that's Christian Jones out of Texas. 4-year starter. He's played both tackle spots. Kind of, for me, he's that swing guy that they've been missing ever since. I don't know. It's been a while since they've had one of those guys. What, Jermaine Illuminor might have been the last swing tackle they had.
I was going to go even further back with Cam Fleming.
Yeah, there you go. He's not the most athletic guy, so some speed rushers, may be able to get by him, but he's a strong guy, especially if you're looking for a big guy to kind of like anchor the right side if you need to. He's a guy who could probably do that. And if you needed him to in a pinch, he could probably kick inside the guard with the size that he has. So I'm sorry, I cheated a little bit there, and I took two more after co-signing, but I liked both those guys too much not to mention them.
No, that's perfectly fine. I'm totally fine with that. I think it's such a deep position too. Like I think guys that we like, that we didn't talk about too. We didn't talk about Kingsley Suama Taya from BYU, who we've mocked a lot to the Patriots. And I'm surprised you didn't talk about Blake Fisher from Notre Dame, who was the right tackle in South Bend. But I feel like there aren't many, places that you can go at this position group where you're going to be like, oh, okay, that seems like a mistake, or that's a, throwing a coin into a wishing well at the tackle position. But there are definitely a lot of guys at this position that could work. You could figure it out.
Yeah, I think the reason why Fisher didn't make my list was I watched a lot of Notre Dame football, and there were times where he flashed, and then there were times that I was just like, oh man, that was a terrible rep, or a terrible game. There were just games where he just flat out was getting pantsed. So he was more uneven than I would have liked to see, and it's very possible that that someone like Jones has the same kind of issues. But I saw a lot of Fisher, so that was something that actually worked against him in my eyes, was how much I saw of him.
Who'd you have as your name guy?
I had from Wisconsin, J.P. Benschwazel. Wait, I definitely messed that up. I'm not okay. I'm done trying.
I'm going to attempt it in the German. Benschwazel.
There you go. Yeah, that's it. How about you?
So one of my, kind of word rules that I try to follow is alliteration is always awesome. So the guy I'm going to go with is the right tackle from the University of Washington, Roger Rosengarten.
There you go.
Some honorable mentions that I did have. One of them was from Ohio State, Zen Michalski.
Oh.
I feel like, if he had some good blocks, you could pull out the old Jon Stewart, your moment of Zen. And then I think one that was just funny just because tackles aren't normally the speedy types, was Pierce Quick from Georgia Tech.
Thanks for hanging out for another episode. This was a lot of fun. We're going to keep it rolling next week with the last of our position groups. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. Also want to encourage everybody to listen to Reminder Publishing's podcast, So That Reminds Me, which drops this week. I talk with Tarla Garnett about some of the things going on in our local community here in Western Massachusetts, and it's a really great listen. Once again, thanks for tuning in to Maz's Musings. We're actually going to have a bonus podcast this week where I talk about my recent vacation on the Disney Wish, kind of piggybacking off the conversation I had with Emily Carlson from We Do Travel Right a few weeks ago. I've got a lot of insight on this vacation and how it can work best for you, my observations, my thoughts. A few people had some questions that I figured I'd answer for them. So that'll be coming out shortly. I encourage you to listen to that as well. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to reach out to me, mazasmusings@gmail.com, or on Twitter or X at mazasmusings. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.